All right. Welcome back to another episode of Attribution Nation podcast. In this current series, we are stepping into the C-suite to hear directly from CMOs and marketing leaders navigating today's most complex marketing challenges. From AI disruption to the age-old alignment battles with sales, we're unpacking the real reporting and data problems that leaders are solving for today and some of the ones that are still keeping them up at night. So, join us for candid conversations that go beyond metrics and into the strategies, experiments, and lessons that are shaping the future of marketing leadership. I am joined today by Cat Holt, founder and chief brand officer of Coologee. And in this interview, we're going to talk about how brands can be measured more effectively, how brand measurement and investment influences lower funnel performance, and then some new research that Cat is leading on brand health and media impact. So, Cat, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you on the show.
That's a pleasure to be here. Your conversations are always so lively, so I can't wait to see where this one's going to go.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait also. So, why don't we just start off with, we know that you're the founder and chief brand officer at Coologee. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of got to where you are and what made you decide to start this business.
It's funny because I have been in this business for my entire career, and that is not something I would have expected if you'd asked my 20-year-old self. My background is a musician and artist, and so making things and creating have always been part of who I am. I ended up going to school for psychology. I wanted to figure out what made people do the things that they do. I also had it in my idea I would go and create modern day version of Northern Renaissance art with symbolism and expressiveness, and ended up not quite coming back on that journey. But it did mean that after I graduated, I knew I didn't want to be a therapist because the idea of talking about people's problems over and over again, even after a solution has been identified, is my version of hell. And so my college advisor said, well, you do art and you have this psychology background. Why don't you go into advertising? And so I did. And I was fortunate enough to enter that world in New York City in the pretty wonderful brand planning first organization called Merkley Newman Hardy at the time. It's Merkley and Partners now. And it meant that I was able to think about strategy, strategic storytelling, to tap into this idea of why do people think and do the things that they think and do. And it was happening right at the time of .com boom and bust, and everyone rushing to build a website. And that meant that I was immersed in digital and technical and measurement. And it's combined so that I have that mind that sort of is the 3-year-old mind of why, with an ability to think about the analytics, because you had to back then and even straight through to today, but also understanding how psychology and really strong creative play a role in effective branding and marketing. And it's culminated in me really trying to figure out how organizations can better understand that brand is a business asset. It's not just a creative exercise. And that's become a little bit of a rallying cry for me.
When you mentioned art and psychology, I was like, okay, that tracks. That makes a lot of sense. Art plus psychology equals marketing. Like that makes sense.
It does. I know.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like the new formula. Although we don't have those in our job descriptions, and we probably would benefit if we did.
Probably. I know so many people that have educational backgrounds in some discipline of art or psychology that ended up in marketing. So it definitely makes sense. Yeah.
There's a lot of us. There are. It's funny. We joke at Coologee that it's almost like a prerequisite for either working with us or being our clients is having some kind of musical background, because I would say 9 out of 10, it's actually a box that's checked.
Yeah. And most of the people that come from art and psychology backgrounds end up in brand. It's
if you want to make money.
Well, yeah.
If you're skewing the starving artist model, yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So when you talk to clients today, what do you think is the biggest misconception about what
Mm.
brand actually does for a business?
I think right now, folks that are in business leadership have grown up in a world that promises almost immediate returns on dollars spent in market. An expectation that if I just put something into search and I do a little bit of social, we're able to go viral and sell a lot of things. Both of those tend to work really well at the sort of bottom of the funnel, not that great at building an understanding of who you are or a reputation for why I should choose you or staying top of mind when a need arises so that you're thought of, which are not near term returns. Um, and it's just not really well understood that you have to have a notion of who you are, why anyone should care, and a continual drumbeat in the market that says, "Hey, I'm here. So when you have a need, we're going to be the ones that you think of, and you're going to be doing a buying behavior of some kind or an information gathering behavior of some kind." I think it's been the false promise of digital marketing, performance marketing. And I think both are very important, but they're not able to do the work of setting a company up for future growth and success on their own. They have to be done in collaboration and cooperation with the notion of what is brand and brand reputation building and protecting.
Yeah, there it's shocking to me how many people think that, brand or digital marketing in any way, shape, or form just like completely invalidates how long sales cycles actually are.
It does.
It's
It does. Mostly because, and this is something that we've obviously dug into deeply and are continuing to explore. But if you think about the percentage of the population that is in market at any given time for whatever product or service you as a company provide, it's like 5% of the addressable market. And when you think about, well, is my marketing working? You're usually just asking how many of those 5% are we getting right now? Because we typically look at performance in a 30 to 90-day window. We don't look at it annually, most of the time because we haven't set up the analytics in order to allow for us to do so, which is a problem that we have. And that problem is obscured by the fact that we have analytics and data on the near term. And so a lot of times we have instances where people think that something is working and they feel good because there is an ROI within 30 to 90 days. But in most cases, that's not going to allow for you to be successful moving forward because what happens for the 95% of the remaining addressable market if you haven't done a single thing to tell your story, to build some kind of affinity, and to maintain some kind of top of mind awareness so that when they become in market, they enter into that 5% who are actually shopping right now or choosing right now, that they make sure that they have you in the consideration set. And so it feels like it's disciplined and responsible, but in actuality, it's not. It's the opposite.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times we see those outliers of like, oh man, this thing was like super effective, super quick, and we've already got some revenue out of it that like we just expect everything to follow that pattern. And
Yeah,
that's
it's
just
true.
not it's just not the way any of this works. It doesn't work that way. Like sometimes you literally have to wait 12 months to understand what the ROI is on a certain ad that you ran. And no, there's no way to speed that up. Like
No.
that's just how long things take sometimes. And I think we struggle to get people to understand that time lag as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why I'm so driven to do the work that we are doing currently, to understand, how can we demonstrate that there is some kind of value add for a maintained brand program of some kind. And it doesn't always have to be what I think a lot of people think of, which is, oh, you're just telling me to do a really big ad on television, right? And I think the golden child for that is a Super Bowl ad, which is coming up soon or may have just passed when this goes live. Um, and the reality is that that's one of many ways to make sure that people are thinking about you, learning about you, talking about you. But it's not the only way. And the most important thing is to be consistent in whatever it is that you do, because it's the consistency that builds brand, not this episodic push to have an ROI every month, every quarter, every 6 months, et cetera, which is typically the cycle of measurement and frankly, the window that a lot of executives give for an opportunity to show if something is, quote, working, as if we still have to prove that marketing, advertising, brand building, acquisition is still needing to prove itself as a vehicle for fueling business growth. But that's the situation that I find myself in often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you're working on ways right now to make brand impact more measurable and repeatable. So, what does an effective brand measurement framework look like in practice? Like what are some of the key elements that are in there?
I think that there are three major components to being able to do this well. One is to start to develop a known audience list where either you're working with your own prospect or customer list, or you're working with a third-party data provider and creating cells within that of treatments. And so let's just say that we have 300 names. I put one in a control, they don't receive anything. 100 in a control, they don't receive anything. And we do that by suppressing, right? Making sure that they don't receive it through a digital known audience paid tactic. A second cell might be performance only, where you're just delivering things like the Google PMax or Meta form fill, or there are ways to do some of this in paid search as well. And then the last one is adding a layer that includes more narrative and storytelling. Oftentimes we think about the unskippable, lean back type of video content or streaming content is more brand building because we tend to be more passive when we're experiencing that instead of actively in my phone or on my computer trying to get a task done. Which is typically where we end up encountering and acting on those more performance or bottom funnel tactics. But because you have a known list, you can then match that to the end result. And you can say, all right, what treatment did they get? What percentage of them ended up taking the actions that we want and ultimately becoming a customer? And because you're able to watch those people over time, you have a much better understanding of which segment contributed to a higher lifetime value for a customer segment, whether it was the control, didn't get anything, found you through whatever means would have naturally happened without you doing any efforts. Bottom of the funnel versus the more full funnel, right? Brand all the way through performance. And what we find is the lifetime value for that third category is higher. Now, oftentimes the cost per acquisition is higher. But if conversion is better, in other words, the people who take action are much more likely to buy, and the sort of affinity that creates a repeat purchase or larger purchases is better, then having a higher cost per acquisition is worth it.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And you only can do that if you have something that allows for you to watch those people over time and control it, like a known audience test might prove. So that's one way that you can do it. Another way that we've often done it is to have test and control markets, whether it's geographically contained. One that we just have completed recently for a client looked at having sort of an overlap where we had two different audiences that work together, right? So one is a distribution channel, the other is a direct consumer. And we had states in which we were doing a match market. In other words, were these markets that had a lot of people that were in the distribution category with a lot of shoppers, and being sure to control for that. Because if you don't match the market, you can't really say with good faith that the reason that there was a different result was because of your marketing efforts, right? If you have one state that is really high market share, high potential, and you're comparing it to another state where you have very little distribution, very little market penetration, the same dollars in each of those markets are going to perform differently, because in a low penetration market or a low share of market, you're going to be spending more dollars to get people versus ones that are high potential and high share of market. And so you have to be careful about that. But if you do a matched market test during a period of time and you have really good tracking, you can attribute back to the campaign new business, number one. So that's direct attribution. But number two, you can look at the difference in the change that happens, the lift or suppression, depending on which way it goes. And that's sort of an all other category where you say, we can't say a direct attribution, but we know the only thing that is different for the most part is whether we had brand in there, brand and full funnel, and whether we were only targeting one segment versus another or both at the same time. And if you do that at a high enough spend for enough of a time, then you're going to see a difference, and it should build some confidence in executives that if you do one strategy over another, that you're likely to have greater success. And so sometimes we see that is easier, especially if you just don't have the data set or you want to have tactics that are not just digital in nature. And then the last one is you really can look at um, same market, not necessarily control, but lift year over year. And so taking a look back at the same time period, what were the results, and controlling for whatever that trend was. So you can create an index of change that's relative to what happened last year versus this year, what happened in that same month versus this year, the same month. And that really does help as well. And you can do that sort of episodically. In other words, you can do just a brand test for a little bit and then just a direct test and so forth. And so those are kind of three ways that we think about it. The most important is being able to connect between the measurement that happens in media, especially digital media, and the ability to track that through some kind of lead generating behavior all the way to a sale. Um, and it's much easier when there's an online sale or a call center sale to do that than in retail, but there are ways to match it back in retail experiences too. It is. Without naming them. Right. That's right. That's right. And what's interesting about that is, um, in many ways, that's what a business intelligence or analytics group should be doing within the organization. And, or it might be in your sales organization. Um, what I find interesting is so often my client organizations don't even have an ability to do that. And what also is interesting to me is even though they don't necessarily have the data set that we think is a prerequisite in order to do a really intelligent in market test to prove the value of brand, to prove the value of a marketing program. Um, there is still this expectation that marketing will deliver at that sophistication level, even if the sales organization doesn't have it or the business analytics team doesn't have it. And what I find interesting is that those, maybe not the business analytics, but sales sometimes gets a pass because it feels like it's a person to person. It's a conversation, it's a relationship program, whereas marketing should be something else. But in reality, marketing and branding is relationship building at scale. And if marketing is being held to that expectation, shouldn't your sales? And shouldn't you have an ability to look at business results with that same sophistication? Because we do need that as a precursor for the match market one. I mean, there are other ways to do it without that kind of sophistication for the other two models I talked about. But um, I find it interesting that there's often this, um, I would say, almost like a trying to put marketing and branding into a box that does not allow for it to have a seat at the business table when the opposite should be the case. Because if you look at business results, and this has been proven time and again by organizations like Interbrand or McKinsey, and we write on this constantly about what is one of the things that is always true for the leaders in any given category. Well, what is typically true of the leaders, the market leaders, is that their brand health outperforms their competitors, right? And we measure that in a number of different ways, whether it's traditional brand tracking and brand health monitoring through primary research, or looking at branded search, or looking at some of the other kind of measures that we have that are in market measures, like website volume, which is also can be an indication if you control for marketing dollars. What we find is that those folks are always outperforming the competitors in things like price protection or if it's a publicly traded company, those stocks tend to grow faster than the S&P index. Or if you're looking at revenue growth relative to category norms, their growth is outperforming the category norm. And there's lots of things that are different, but one of the things that's different is the fact that its brand's reputation is what we call healthier. It's better understood. It's more top of mind. In other words, people think of it when you ask them to list. Well, if you're in car shopping, what dealerships are you going to go into, or what are the brand names that you're going to search for? If your brand isn't there, you're not going to get an app bet. I don't care how fabulous your paid search is. Unless it's a kind of customer, which happens in property and casualty, which is I have in my background. I worked at Progressive Insurance in-house for a number of years. And what we found is that the folks that did bottom of funnel were the ones that were told no by everybody else. And so, yes, they are looking at cheap car insurance and then clicking and doing a quote with you. That doesn't mean that they chose you as a brand. That means that they've been told no by everyone else, and they're trying to find an option that will say yes. That's not an ideal customer. But if you don't think about your brand health and you're not investing in it, you're going to get everybody that feels they don't have an option or making a commoditized choice. They want something that's as inexpensive and as easy as possible. It's amazing. I know. It's amazing. I feel like because in marketing and branding, we've had to because we haven't been understood as providing business value. And so we've gotten better at it. Yeah, I mean, well, I will say because I work with sales organizations all the time and have helped with sales optimization. And I will say that there are a number of instances where marketing qualified leads are not qualified. It's junk, right? And so I think it comes from a sense of, well, my leads are better than marketing's leads. But the missing point there is that marketing leads get better when you have a feedback loop from sales so that we can then indicate back to the platforms that we're optimizing, this is a lead we want more of versus we don't want leads like this at all. And it's exactly. Exactly. Once you have the conversation path open, then it's a mutually beneficial situation. But so often marketing and branding talks a different language or speaks a different language than sales. It's a different culture, belief system, reward system, and it can be operationally hard to do that. But whenever I have a client or any program I'm working on where both sides are working well together, every time we see greater optimization. Mm. This is, in fact, a lot of the work that we've had to do in order to assess where marketing technology and measurement is within the client organizations, and then putting in place recommendations to do a crawl, walk, run approach to building it out. Um, you know, when done very well, it's a pretty advanced system where you have a customer lead database, you have an ability to do tracking with UTM strategies and meta strategies, all the way through to call tracking, where you understand potentially even what search campaign drove a search lead into either a form or a call center, which is just technology that we have available to us today. And then linking from that customer marketing database into a sales database of some kind. And typically it's something like a Salesforce or, sometimes we still have legacy Oracle or whatever, MySQL server is fueling whatever nurturing and customer database might be. And so that's where we want to go. But oftentimes we have to set up something that's shorter, like the crawl. And so all we can do is make sure that if we have, for example, a digital campaign, that we have very clear UTM parameters that allow for us to cut by channel, by placement, by creative type, et cetera, that we're able to track those through to a website, a behavior on the website, um, and then gather those leads, whether it's a click to call or which then requires us to at least timestamp it So if we know somebody clicked on a click to call button, at 12:52 on a Monday, well, we can go look at the incoming call report and see who called at 12:52 on a Monday. And then usually it's one person because of just the nature of the volumes that's happening by that point in time. But even if it's a dozen, you can do a partial attribution or watch those come through, and sort of do it a little bit more manually until we get to a place where we can take the next step to make the investment in order for it to improve. Um, Usually it's iterative steps, and usually it's bringing a couple of folks that are responsible for reporting out on performance together so that we have a common definition. And so typically what we need to do is bring the folks that are responsible for the measurement across the business together so that we can identify what is it that we're measuring it, how are we defining it, and then we literally work together to create one scorecard where the person in charge of the website analytics is providing the information in the data structure that we are using in order to prove either a lift in geography or incrementality, or looking back year over year for different treatments. Um, Maybe we'll be working with the organization that's responsible for consumer billing or the sales organization, in addition to folks that have their responsibility for optimizing the media plan. And as long as you have a measurement strategy with a vision for a performance dashboard, with a collaboration, cooperation with other folks that are responsible for saying whether or not something yielded a result, and you're all working together, you're pretty confident that how one person is seeing the story and describing whether something worked or did not and in what way, um, is in keeping with how you understand it. And frankly, you're all better off for it because each of the folks that are responsible for understanding the performance reporting will understand the other things that we can't even anticipate, like incremental seasonality changes, or, oh, we just turned on or off this one campaign, or we, created 4 new locations within this one geography, and that could have been something that changed what the numbers were. And so it's all about a conversation, but those are the way forward for understanding how to do better analysis of what did a brand and marketing campaign do for a business.
Now you've talked a little bit before about how, brand marketing and brand spending can affect, performance media and acquisition efficiency. What are you kind of learning about the relationship between, that brand spend and then lower in the funnel when people are converting and turning into to pipelining deals?
Well, it's a really excellent question. And in fact, I would say I'm not even advocating for enough of a brand spend relative to some of the market research that's already out there today. And so what we actually find is that we need to have at least a 50-50 split if it's a brand that's brand new and nobody knows about it, or nobody knows about it, in terms of brand building initiatives, right? A placement that's out there that's going to tell the story, that is going to be unskippable, that is going to show up. It could be organic content that you boost. It could be appearing on a podcast and making sure you have lots of opportunities. It could be PR. It could be television. But it's that constant at bat telling stories so that you're looking for improved reach and frequency. In other words, we're getting in front of as many people as possible, enough times for them to have an understanding of who we are as a brand. And then the other 50% are trying to get those people, capture them as leads, capture them as customers. There's actually research that shows that number should actually have a much larger investment in brand than in bottom of the funnel. Now, that's over time, I believe. And that's also something that takes a pretty courageous executive suite to invest in. Because it looks like I'm spending more and not getting enough of a return in a single calendar year, which is essentially all that we're giving our executives an opportunity to prove themselves out in anyway, particularly marketing people. If you look at CMOs, their tenure is still 18 months on average. Why is that? Well, they're not being seen as strategic. They're not necessarily informing what the direction is moving forward, but they're asked after all the decisions are made to make it work without necessarily even having enough of an investment in order to make it work, with an expectation you're going to see results in a quarter or a half a year or a year. And so that's a challenging position to find yourself in. And it takes courage for any executive to say, I understand and I want to invest in my brand. So we typically don't get an opportunity to do that. I actually argue sometimes against it in order to make sure we have enough of an immediate return. With the hope that over time, we're able to prove that there's a higher value when you're building the brand and someone comes in motivated to have a relationship with you. But that takes time, and it can take 18 months, 24 months to have a data set in-house that gives a data-driven confidence to executives so that they then make the investments that are required to build the brand. But it is closer to 70-80% brand and the rest being performance marketing if you look at some of the literature that's out there right now. Currently, we're in the process of doing an evaluation of campaigns across different categories to try and come up with our own version of that measurement number within a different time frame, a shorter time frame. But if you have no brand awareness, we really say we won't do any acquisition unless you have at least 30% in brand, because it's not going to work. It's going to give you probably a lot of leads at volume, but they're not the right ones.
Yeah, it's tough getting, particularly with marketing leaders, CMOs having an 18-month kind of runway. Is so difficult to get people off of the MQL addiction, because that's how you prove your value when deal cycles take, a year to a year and a half. That's how long your tenure is going to be, is a year to a year and a half. Like, what else do you hang your hat on other than MQLs? Like, it's tough. It's so tough.
Well, I'm going to add on some challenges that marketing leaders have that pertain to the 18-month tenure. So another fun thing of being a psychology major and a digital interested person is I've done a lot of digital transformations for organizations, including Progressive. And it doesn't matter how big the organization is, I have found that change of that magnitude, in other words, you're asking seasoned people to learn something that they're not comfortable in and change their behaviors in order to believe that they will have future success, even though their entire career they've been successful doing things differently. Right? That's how I define, fundamental change management within an organization. I have never been able to do that change in less than 18 months to 24 months. So let's just say you're a marketing executive that's coming in. Not only do you have this expectation of performance fast, which, by the way, is going to require change, because why are you being hired in the first place? Mm-hmm. You often have teams that are there that do things one way, and you have to do a transformation of some kind in order to change the operations within the in-house. You often have to have different partners to work with you. And I am telling you right now, that is impossible. You can do iterative components. You can show small wins, but you cannot do all of that as a leader that's trying to transform marketing within an organization in less than 18 months.
Right. Yeah, you can't. You cannot.
It's impossible. No. And then the other thing I will say is, if you think about brand as more than a logo or a look and feel, it's going to also influence product development, customer experience design, the notion of whether you expand into adjacent markets, if you want to then expand your distribution channels, these things all end up coming together to say, well, what can I expect from this brand? And can I trust this brand in some way, shape, or form? Can I
Mhm.
believe that this brand is going to credibly be able to deliver a different product or service than the one I'm accustomed to? If the brand leader, if the marketing person isn't at the table informing and helping to debate what should be done next, then how can they be held accountable for the outcomes of marketing programs that they had no strategic input into in the first
Right.
place?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so it's difficult to be successful as an executive leader if you're not at the executive table influencing the business strategy within an organization.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think, I mean, ultimately everything you just said there, I think partially leads to why what are the cliche two big projects that any CMO starts with when they started a new business or at a new organization for them?
Yeah.
Cliche number one, we're going to do a brand refresh.
Rebranding.
Cliche number two, we're going to redo the website.
Mhm.
Why? Because like if my tenure is 18 months, I need to have an impact, and the biggest impact I could have is one of those two things. And that's like, it's almost like a desperate cry for help that these are the two things I'm going to work on, because these are the only two things that I think can have enough of an impact to get me to last past 18 months.
Yeah. And let's be honest, whenever you have a rebrand, you have to be careful, and I've talked a lot about what happened with Cracker Barrel and their rebranding that happened, last summer, right? And the simplest way to describe that is that the rebrand forgot why people cared about the brand to begin with, right? It took the heart out, which is it was always the old time country store. And instead of figuring out what does that mean today, which, by the way, we've had oodles of examples of that. From, the gains with Magnolia to homesteading to a return to like family meal styles in New York City where you just have those long tables and you end up talking to random people because we're yearning for connection. That's what you did in a country store. There were a lot of ways for them to take what they are known for and then introduce the way that that's understood today, but they didn't. They took the person that represented it out of their logo and they slashed their menu to take the comfort food that people who adored them were coming back to their locations over and over again. That is
Yeah.
a really good example of the right ask. How can we rebrand to keep younger people coming back? But short-sighted, or maybe not understanding the power of brand beyond a logo and why it's so important and needs to be managed at the business table, because they slashed their same store profits and they lost their equity. And so that can be really challenging if you don't think about brand as a business strategy. Similarly, if you think about websites done wrong can tank business results. And it's even small little technical things like making sure that you're doing a redirect for past pages so that you're not losing the traffic that comes through into an error page. Making sure you're using something like a search console to push new content out so the bots can crawl you faster. It can take 30 to 90 days just to get back to your organic position and volume.
Yeah.
And so, each of these things has a business strategy implication that is thought of typically as a creative fix. And when you just think about it that way, you have expectations that things can go faster without an understanding of what could happen from a business outcomes perspective.
That is a whole other podcast episode that we could do about bad brand refreshes. The one that comes to mind for me is Jaguar, the car company.
Yeah,
They got rid of the leaping Jaguar, which is iconic and like,
and I would say why
conveys so many things about the car itself. Like, you are getting a car that is the vehicular representation of a Jaguar, and then you
100%.
changed it to a logo that looks like it belongs on a refrigerator. it's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
Yeah, well, and then I think that could go into a whole nother conversation about the look-alike sameness across all different tiers. The fact that we have lost distinction in design, which I think goes back to the notion of confidence. Do you, as an executive leadership team, have the confidence to be different? It's hard to have that confidence, but I will tell you what, if you don't, you're not going to have the business results you want. You're not going to be demanding the premium that you are accustomed to being able to demand. And you're not going to be able to understand what segment of the market you're for. And the minute you forget that and you don't know who you're for is the minute you're spending too much money just to get some folks to come in and not want to pay as much as you want them to pay for the product or service you're offering.
Well, Kat, I feel like we could go on for a lot longer, but we're bumping up on time here.
I know, Drew. I know. This is just one of those things where we just have to continue in episodes 3, 4, and 5.
Seriously. So what we always like to do at the end of these is kind of a quick little recap of some key takeaways. So I'll kind of go down the list here of some things that we heard that we think our listeners should pay attention to. So number one is that we know that brand takes time. You might see immediate results, but more often than not, it can take up to 12 plus months to see the full results of the investment in brand. And and part of that is because of the 95-5 rule, that only 5% of your market is in market at that point in time. So it's so important to stay top of mind for that 95% that isn't in market, but that when they become in the market, you're in the list, you're on the list. And we know there's additional studies that say that I think it's 80% of deals go to a brand that was part of the original list. So you've got to be a part of that original list. And that means you're marketing to the 95%, which means it takes time. Another one is that, for brand, 2 tried and true measurement methodologies are incrementality testing and lift analysis. And that when you do that, you have to be really, really careful about the way you structure your experiments, and that your test groups and control groups have to really, really look alike and be very, very similar. You can't compare, markets where you've got a great presence versus a bad presence. That's just not going to work. There's a huge double standard in the types of data and quality of data between marketing and sales. Marketing has to be perfect. Sales gets a lot more leeway. But it's because that sales comes across as more relationship-based and one-to-one, kind of like that one-to-one relationship, whereas marketing is relationship building at a much larger scale. So there's some reasons behind it, but it's really not a fair double standard. So, not good, but ultimately the goal there a lot of the times is to get that feedback loop back from sales, because that actually helps marketing do better marketing and bring in more of the leads that sales wants and fewer of the leads that sales doesn't want. And then lastly, marketing transformation takes time. With the average, CMO life cycle being about 18 months. If you're trying to transform a non-digital first marketing organization into a digital first marketing organization, or change a non-brand marketing organization into a brand first marketing organization, guess how long it's going to take you? About 18 months.
18 months.
So we've got to have a little bit more patience around how soon we're going to see return on these changes, because these things just take time. And unfortunately, there's no way to speed up the time to value for a lot of these things. It just doesn't exist. So, Kat, those are the big takeaways for today.
Well done, Drew.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and having you on here. So really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Me too. It's been a pleasure.